The 616th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh, Nathan here with you guys on a Sunday night, here to get you ready for Carolina and St. Bonaventure. That game will come your way Tuesday night, 6 p.m. over on FS1 as a part of the Fort Myers tip-off event. Carolina will play the Bonnies on Tuesday, and then they will play Michigan State on Thursday. As a part of this year's holiday event, one that looks a lot different than what you're typically used to seeing from Carolina. They're usually in a tournament that does not have predetermined opponents, but this is something that Carolina is involved with this year. Has them playing around the Thanksgiving holiday, but they do have predetermined opponents going into this week. We'll tell you what you need to know about St. Bonaventure. Look at this game from Carolina's perspective. We have a discussion about Carolina's defense I want to have, and then we'll give our keys to the game and make our predictions. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to former President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, for that pod thought, and that thought is, quote, "People acting together as a group can accomplish things which no individual acting alone could ever hope to bring about," end quote. Carolina's accomplished, I think, a good bit here in the first 3 weeks of the season. They're off to a 5-0 start. They're looking to accomplish more this week with a chance to earn their second most signature win of the season. But the biggest thing we've been able to tell so far about this group is that it's a team. It's a unified roster. It's a roster that's in lockstep with their head coach, with the coaching staff. And it might seem like an overreach or an overstatement. That just simply wasn't the case last year with Carolina. And it was about this time a year ago that we really learned that they were going to have issues that were going to carry over throughout the rest of the regular season. Carolina was in Maui a year ago, and they went 1-2 and was an epic comeback away against Dayton from going over. And quite simply, they never recovered from that. And it felt like some of the issues that permeated during those 3 games in 3 days kind of carried over into the rest of the season. And as we learned, it was a group that lacked leadership, and it was a group that wasn't all bought in on trying to achieve things together. That hasn't been the case with this year. Yes, Caleb Wilson has established himself as the best player for Carolina, but you're getting contributions from Henry Vassar, Jared Stevenson, Seth Trimble when he was healthy. And after a disappointing end to a win over Navy, Seth Trimble called the team together, and they addressed some of the issues that existed in that game. And I think that's something that kind of relates to this quote where people acting together as a group can accomplish things which no one can accomplish individually. And I think as we've learned, while Carolina has some great individual players, this is a team that is much more full and much more complete than we've seen in years past.
Yeah, I think that certainly is the case for this group, is that this group just seems to work better together. They fit better together than the previous groups for Carolina under Hubert Davis. And so you're hoping that they're going to be able to bounce back from the performance that they had against Navy. And the thing that's crazy is that's a 12-point win for them. So, I mean, we're saying that they called a team meeting and everything like that, but it was a 12-point win for the team. So, I mean, for this group, this area of the season's really going to define this year, I think, for Carolina. This is where we're going to start to find out just how good Carolina is, because, St. Bonaventure, not as good as I think they've been maybe in years past. I think it's still possible that they could be that good. I think we don't really know a ton about them coming into this Fort Myers Tip-Off Classic, either. But at the same time, when they play Michigan State, I think that's going to be a very defining game. You've got the game, of course, coming up soon against Georgetown that Carolina is going to have to play. And then the game against Kentucky, it's going to be in a relatively short span here. So this is the time of the year where we start to figure out what exactly Carolina is this season. And so I'm intrigued to see what it looks like, but it feels like this is a group that, even though, as you said, they have some outstanding individual players. I mean, you've got Caleb Wilson, you've got Henry Vassar, who's having a really strong year. And some of the other guys on this team, Luka Bogovac's playing well here recently. You would think that, Carolina would be a team that was defined by one player. I think that a lot of people define the Tar Heels by what Caleb Wilson does. But as you could see the other night in that game against Navy, even though Caleb Wilson played incredibly well, it takes a full team effort to be able to come out with a victory and to be able to win the way that you're supposed to. So hopefully that was the gut check moment for Carolina. Hopefully that was the moment where they realized that they need to play even a little bit better than they've been playing here to start the year if they want to be able to win a game as significant as the one that they're going to have to play on Thursday here in Fort Myers when they play against Michigan State, who, coming off of that win over Kentucky, looks like they are poised to be just as good as they were a year ago.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be the start of us to learning, I think, just how high Carolina can climb. And maybe we'll learn about the floor of this group as well. And that's usually the case around Thanksgiving. Usually that's when Carolina is in some big time event, and which this obviously is not. You've got two premier brands. You've got Carolina and Michigan State competing in this event, but this is not Maui. This is not the Battle for Atlantis. They're not in the Players Tip-Off Classic either. How do you feel about this shift, I think, from Carolina? Because this is not a one-off. If we go back to last year and when the program was in Maui, Hubert Davis kind of basically pretty much alluded to, as long as he's the head coach, they won't compete in that event moving forward. They were only in that event last year because they had already agreed to that event, because that event schedule is 4 years out. And so it was kind of out of his control. Same thing with the Battle for Atlantis. The Players Era event in Vegas is growing in popularity. That's going to be a 32-team event before it's all said and done. And there's financial ramifications as to why programs are going to compete in that event, but they're still not as historically important to the sport like Maui, like the Battle for Atlantis have become as a part of Feast Week. Carolina is still going to be challenged because St. Bonaventure is a quality program out of the A-10. Michigan State, I think, has emerged as a legitimate Final Four contender here in the first 3 weeks of the season. but we're used to seeing Carolina play on a much bigger stage, albeit than the one that the Fort Myers tip-off event will offer them this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it because I think you look at the tournament that became popular this year as well was the Bahamar Championship. That was one that in the past we have not really seen be all that popular of a tournament. And you look and you see why. You see why a team like Purdue wanted to be involved in that tournament, why a team like Texas Tech wanted to be involved in that tournament. It's 2 games. It's a short sprint. And so all you have to do is win your first round matchup, and then you're into the final, and you're playing against a really good team that can help to pick up a big win for Carolina. This one, I think the reason why this was so attractive to Carolina is because you don't even have to do that in this one. There's no tournament aspect to this. So Carolina is guaranteed to play Michigan State. They are guaranteed to have a quad 1 game that they are going to play early on in the season. And so if they can get a win out of that, you pick up a huge quad 1 win before you even jump into conference play. I think that's huge for Carolina, where with some of these events, especially if you look at Maui this year, I mean, NC State's the favorite to win Maui this year. This is no longer a tournament, especially in this era, that I think is going to be as loaded as it has been in years past. I think with the Players Era tournament that is happening in Vegas, you're going to see a lot of the top programs that are going to go there. And so I think Maui and the Battle for Atlantis are going to become, events that you don't necessarily go to unless you're in that second tier. I'll be interested to see, will Carolina be one of those teams that will opt for the Players Era tournament because of just the types of NIL ramifications that you can get from it, and the revenue that's going to be coming out of that as well. So I'm going to be intrigued to see whether or not Carolina is interested in doing that in future years. You would imagine that the money pool is going to be something that the higher ups in the basketball program are going to be very interested in. I don't know if Hubert Davis is necessarily going to be interested in it. That'll be something that we'll have to find out at a later time. But in terms of this event, it's not shocking. I think teams either want to go to that Players Era event and be involved in something that can help with NIL and help with the revenue that your program gets overall, or they want to be in a very small tournament where you can really set up your own matchups and, get something out of it that you're hoping to get out of it, instead of exhausting your players early in the season and potentially coming away with no opportunities to win quad 1 games. So I don't really hate the strategy from Carolina this year.
Yeah, the Players Era is the best of both worlds because, one, with as many teams that are there, you're still going to see quality competition. You're still going to get to test yourself and get a chance to get some marquee wins on a neutral floor, which does matter whenever you're trying to build for March, because last time I checked, the NCAA tournament is played on neutral venues. You're not playing on your home gym, but you also get paid to get there. And I think that's going to be something whenever Steve Newmark officially takes over as the athletic director of Carolina, he'll probably be very interested in trying to get Carolina involved with, because with his background in NASCAR, revenue is going to be the most important thing he does as Carolina's AD. I understand the shift in philosophy. I do think there's something about seeing Carolina and Maui that's nostalgia to being a Carolina basketball fan. And, it goes back to where you saw him from Coach Smith to Coach Williams and up to Hubert Davis, where every 4 years you built your first 3 days of the Thanksgiving week around staying up late into the middle of the night to watch Carolina play basketball. And so I am going to miss that. With that being said, it's not Carolina the only one that's choosing to do this. Dan Hurley, flat out told the tournament last year after they went 0 for 3, we will not be back. And now maybe that's because he was being a sore loser and he lost all 3 games there. But I don't think he was mincing words, and they're not the only one. It's not an accident why the field looks the way that it looks this year and why they struggle to put together the field for next year. If you look at it, it's not going to look a normal Maui field. And so Carolina's not the only one that's choosing to do this. I don't like it. but they don't ask me my opinion. One day they will, and one day they will. I'll be able to make these decisions, but that day, unfortunately, is not today, and that's why we get to see Carolina in Fort Myers and not in Maui, not at the Battle for Atlantis or even the Players Era event. Let's now get you ready for this matchup with St. Bonaventure. Dating back to 1949, 1950, these two programs have met just one time, but that lone meeting was a big one. It came back in 1968 in the NCAA tournament and the regional semifinals, and a win that have sent Carolina to the Elite Eight on their way to their second of three straight Final Fours. It was a game that Carolina won 91-72. Former Carolina basketball player Larry Miller led Carolina with 27 points in the win. You look at this year's version of the Bonnies, they bring with them a 5-0 record with wins over Bradley 69-63, Canisius 89-70, Siena 75-66, Youngstown State 84-80, and Robert Morris 75-61. They have three players that average double-figure scoring, led by Daryl Simmons, the second, and his 18.6 points, 2.2 rebounds, 3 assists. He is shooting 48% from the field, 41% from three. Frank Mitchell is their second double-digit scorer, 16 points per game, 10.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists. He is shooting 57% from the field. And Caden Charles is their third double-digit scorer, 14.4 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.6 assists. He is shooting 49% from the field, 36% from three. KenPom, though, not too kind to St. Bonaventure as of Sunday night. Of course, tonight we're sitting here recording. They are 117th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 110.8. That's 107th in the country. And their adjusted defensive efficiency rating is 106.0. That is good for 136th best in all of college basketball. What's brought the program kind of back to the fame is the fact that former ESPN insider Adrian Wojnarowski is now their GM, and he's done a really good job elevating that program's NIL and their status within the A10. This is a proud program that has rich basketball history, tradition. They're usually a team that's fighting for a spot to either win the A10 outright or be an at-large team come Selection Sunday. And so they're a team that kind of like Navy brings with them, a connected group, a group that has experience playing together. They'll be able to test Carolina, but this is not maybe the opponent you're used to seeing Carolina play the first game in their Thanksgiving holiday event.
Yeah, I don't think it's Dayton from last year, which was another A10 team that I think a lot of people expected was going to make the NCAA tournament. I don't know if you're looking at this year's squad and thinking that this is a team that's necessarily going to make the tournament. But Carolina's not careful. This is a team that can really test them because, the thing that I noticed when I looked at their numbers is their numbers are very similar to Navy's in terms of how they play. They're a team that, in 2-point attempts is in the top 30 or 31st in 2-point attempts per game with 43 per game, and 3-pointers attempted per game. They're 343rd with just 17.6. What it means is that this is a team that really likes to play inside out, and they do it better than a lot of the other teams in the country because they not only shoot it pretty decently, from at the rim. I mean, they're solid there. They're not great, but they're solid there. The thing is that from beyond the arc, when they do shoot it, they are knocking down 37.5% of their shots from the outside, which is 63rd in the entire country. They're a team that does a really good job of sealing the rim. That's something that Carolina is going to have to be aware of in this game. 5.8 blocks per game, which is 23rd most in college basketball. That is still a really good number, and especially for them, I think they are hoping that they're going to be able to match Carolina with some size in this game. Frank Mitchell, relatively undersized guy, but look at the way that he's rebounding. 10.6 rebounds per game so far this season, despite being 6'8". Now he is 240 pounds. So that's going to be the thing, is that a little bit thicker, a little bit more physical type of big. So let's see how Carolina responds to that. Look, ultimately, Carolina should not be in trouble in this game. I think this is one game that Carolina should be able to win, but I think this is one of those games that is probably a lot like Navy, where if you're not careful, this is a team that could sneak up on you. So Carolina's got to be prepared for that. They've got to come out and put together one of their best efforts of the year to make sure that this isn't that close of a game, that they can win this game by double figures and get prepared for that game against Michigan State. So hopefully that's the mindset that we see them take after a layoff following that players' meeting against Navy.
You look at this game from Carolina's perspective, the Heels will bring with them a perfect record. They are also 5-0. They are currently ranked 18th in the AP poll. This, though, is the first road game or neutral court game of the season. So after 5 straight games at home in Chapel Hill, Carolina is playing away from home for the first time this season. Carolina has 3 active players that average double-figure scoring, led by Caleb Wilson, the sensational freshman, 20.6 points, 10.0 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and he is shooting a blistering 67% from the field, 40% from 3. Henry Vassar is the second double-digit scorer for Carolina, 14.8 points, 7.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists, and he's shooting 64% from the field and 44% from 3. And then Luka Bogovac is the last active player to average double figures, 12.6 points, 3.4 rebounds, 3 assists. He is shooting 40% from the field, 33% from 3. Some numbers that stand out about Carolina: they are 4th in the country in opponent field goal percentage, holding opponents to just 33% shooting from the field overall, and they are 2nd in 2-point field goal percentage. Opponents are shooting just 34% from the field against the Heels. Their KenPom ratings, a lot more higher than what St. Bonaventure has to boast about. Carolina is 27th overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 117.9. That's 36th in the country, but their adjusted defensive efficiency rating is 97.5. That's good enough for 22nd best in all of college basketball. The discussion topic I want to talk about revolves around Carolina's defense. I kind of had a little conversation similar to this when I joined Isaac Shade on the Locked On Tar Heels podcast last Friday. But I kind of want to just take it to a different angle where, I want to discuss just how real this is. Because like with Shade, we kind of just talked about those numbers and, where does Carolina go from here? I just wanted to ask you flat out, do you believe in what these numbers would suggest? Because what these numbers suggest and what these numbers tell you is that Carolina's defense is what you typically see from teams that play deep into March, go to Final Fours, and win national championships. And I'm not just making that up. I'm not just talking that into the ether. That's just the reality of the situation. Usually teams that compete for titles are top 30 in offense and top 30 in defense. Carolina's outside the top 30 on offense. I think something that will change as they continue to learn how to play with one another. You get Seth Trimble back. But right now they're 22nd in defense. And then you look at just the percentages on a game-by-game basis. It's one of the best defensive teams in all of college basketball in terms of field goal percentage, up there with the likes of Houston. And we've seen what Houston's done. Their defense is what has carried them to 6 straight Sweet 16s, and last year it took them all the way to the national championship game. When you see what Carolina has done through the first 5 games, and that does include a win over Kansas, where they played sensational on both sides of the floor in the second half, just how real is what Carolina has done defensively, and how much do you think that'll carry over into this game and every game moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's pretty real. I mean, look, I can't tell you how it's going to carry over into every game moving forward. I'm not sure about how the rest of the season, especially once they get into conference play, if it carries over the same way there. Same thing as, going into the game against Michigan State. I don't know that they're going to be nearly as dominant as they've been all year. I mean, you go back and look at that Kansas game, they had moments where they weren't nearly as dominant, but they still were really good defensively. And so that's the thing. That's what I expect from this team moving forward this year, is that in just about every aspect of that end of the floor, they're going to be bringing the effort no matter who they are playing. I think that is something that we've seen so far this year, whether it comes to rim protection, whether it comes to taking away the perimeter. They did have some trouble the other night with stopping the dribble drive, but that's certainly something that I think, once they get Seth Trimble back, they'll be much better at being able to do that. But to me, it wasn't a lack of effort. It was just a lack of execution from the guys in that area. So, I mean, look, I don't know that this team is guaranteed to be one of the best defensive teams in the country. I would not put them on the same level as a team like Houston. That is certainly not what we're saying at this point in the season. But what we're saying is that this team feels like they are much better defensively than they've been in years past. Where in years past, it felt like there were times where defense was almost optional, where it felt like, I'm not going to say it was that bad, but it didn't feel like that was a focal point for a lot of the guys on the floor. It felt like most of the attention was on the offensive end of the floor and creating, these high scoring games that Carolina would find a way to win. I don't think that's the way that they're built this year. Now, do I think that Carolina is capable of scoring the basketball at a pretty high rate? I do. I certainly do, especially when Seth Trimble is in the lineup. But I do think that, right now they don't necessarily have that guy that can put pressure on the rim. So you're going to want to play better defensively and really make some of these games a little bit uglier in case your offense isn't necessarily able to put up a huge number on that night. So I like the way that the defenses began this year. I've talked about how much I love the versatility of the guys that you brought in this offseason, especially at the 4 and the 3 spots. The guys that are starting there right now, I think they are tremendous defensively, with both Jaren Stevenson and Caleb Wilson having really good years. You can put them on just about anybody on the floor. If they get caught in switch situations, they've been able to succeed. I love the rim protection that you're getting from Caleb Wilson and Henry Vasar. And then, what you're getting on the perimeter from these guards, has been really solid this year. It hasn't been great. These are not guys that are going to create a ton of turnovers like some of the guards that we've seen in the past for Carolina. And, you don't have Seth Trimble for right now, but I still believe they're doing enough in that area to be able to succeed at one of the highest rates that we've seen them succeed this early in the season. So it's one of the reasons why I feel so confident going into this week. It's one of the reasons why I think they will be a much stiffer test for Michigan State than what we saw Kentucky be able to do, because I just don't think Kentucky is really that good defensively with what we've seen so far from them early in the season. And it's why I think Carolina has a chance to come out of this week 2-0 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think it's legitimate. One, because when you're as big and as long and as athletic as you are, it helps you to be what Carolina has been defensively. And make no mistake about it, the added size and added length has helped vault them to where they are defensively. There's also just a buy-in factor on that end of the floor that we're not used to seeing this time of the year. Like, usually this time of the year, I'm kicking and screaming and really wondering, is Carolina going to be able to contain the dribble drive? Is Carolina going to be able to guard the 3-point line? And they've been able to do so pretty frequently so far this season, and pretty effectively. And I don't think that's going to change, because they do a good job running guys off the 3-point line. They do a really good job contesting shots. And really, outside of what happened the other night against Navy, and what Navy did was more schematic in terms of how they got to the rim. I think more than anything, they've done a really good job keeping opponents out of the lane, because when you got 3 dudes 6'10" or taller playing the 3 through the 5 spot, those small guards don't want to go in there and challenge the trees. They want to stay outside on the perimeter and shoot jump shots. And so I do think it's real. And I think they're just scratching the surface of what they can be, because you're without your best defender. Like, you're doing all of this with Seth Trimble injured, which means Carolina's full court press isn't as effective. Their backcourt pressure isn't what it can be. This is all going to go to another level once Trimble comes back, and hopefully he's back by the end of the non-conference season. As someone that's, that's loved the sport, that watches the sport closely, I love to see offense. I love to see points on the scoreboard. And part of that's because when you watch this program and they're playing under Carolina, guess what Carolina did? They scored, and they scored a lot. This, I think, is still really fun to watch. It's really, especially in person. And, we've been lucky and blessed to be in the arena for 2 games so far this season. I'll be there for a handful more moving down the stretch. And I think it's really fun watching Carolina play defense. I think it's fun watching them compete. And usually we're not saying about that this time in November. And the fact that we are, I think it's a sign of what this team has become, or what this team is becoming. And I think it's a real sign that Hubert Davis is not taking no for an answer. If you don't play defense, if you don't defend, if you don't get in the stance and guard, if you don't fight through screens, if you don't call out switches, get a defensive board, so on and so forth, quite simply, you're not going to play. And I think that's a real cool thing to see. And it's a testament for this coaching staff to set that precedent as early on in the season as they have. Let's turn our attention back to St. Bonaventure, give our keys to the game before we make our predictions, and then we'll get out of here. The first key to the game I wrote down was to make their double-digit scores work offensively to get the offensive production that they want to generate. You look at the statistics, they got those 3 guys that average the majority of their points, and then there's a significant drop-off in terms of point per game average. You go from your 3rd leading scorer is averaging north of 14 points per game. Their 4th leading scorer is averaging 8 points per game. That's 6 points per game less than your 3rd guy. And so with that being said, I think the scouting report is going to key in on their 3 guys. That being, Simmons the second, Mitchell, and Charles, and really make the other guys beat you. And that's, easier said than done, obviously. But again, I think when it comes back to the buy-in to on that end of the floor, it makes it easier to accomplish that, because what you can do is point at each guy and say, you take care of your man, you take care of your man, you take care of your man, as opposed to having to throw some special defense together, something like that. And it'd really just become something where Hubert Davis can monitor how those 3 guys are doing defensively against those 3 guys of St. Bonaventure. And if they ain't playing up to snuff, you take those guys out of the game, you try someone else. Those guys are going to put the ball in the basket. You don't average the points that they're averaging without being able to do so. But you got to make them work. You've got to make them grind and make them have to shoot through a contested shot, or have to fight through a handful of screens to even get the ball and get an open shot, which wears down their legs over the course of 40 minutes. So I think it's being mindful that those 3 guys are good, and those guys can and will put the ball in the basket. But let's make them work for it, man, because if they got to work for it, that means the other guys aren't being as effective, and the stats would show you that the other guys aren't good enough to step up and be difference makers for the Bonnies.
Yeah, I mean, with Daryl Simmons the second, the biggest thing against him is going to be taking away the dribble drive, because that was something that was successful for Navy, really caused a lot of issues for Carolina when they would bring that second defender over. It would lead to a lot of those pass outs that were successful, or just an easy pass to the big man that for a finish. That's what you got to avoid in this game. I mean, Simmons is a guy that, kind of half and half. He's a guy that, has 7.4 of his field goal attempts come from 2-point range. Meanwhile, 6.4 of them come from 3-point range. So he's a guy that's shooting the ball well from out there too. That's the guy that you really have to make work. Make his night difficult, because if you make his night difficult, it's going to make everybody else's night difficult. For Mitchell, I think the biggest thing there is just making sure that you can get your hands up, defend without fouling. If you're Henry Vasar, the biggest thing for him as well is going to be able to rebound the ball on the defensive glass, because this is a guy that's averaging 4.6 offensive rebounds per game. Don't allow for those easy second chance opportunities in this one, because that's where Mitchell really thrives. And then Caden Charles, a guy that really is very 2-point based, is going to want to get to the basket. That's where you need someone like a Jaren Stevenson to be able to cut him off, slow him down. We've seen Stevenson be able to do that at times this year. Hopefully he's able to do that again in this matchup. But yeah, I think making these guys have to perform at the level that they've performed, because yeah, they're off to a really good start. They're also off to a really good start against some nothing competition. No slight to a team like Bradley or some of the other teams in there. You never know what those teams can end up becoming. But if we're being honest, these are not the best of the best that you could be facing in the non-conference, even with some of the mid-major teams that you could be facing. So this is a team that Carolina should hopefully be able to, outwork in this game with what they're bringing on the defensive end of the floor. And that's where it's going to start, is by being able to slow down some of these top guys for St. Bonaventure.
The second key to the game, I wrote establish an inside presence. And for me, this is mainly on the offensive end. I think, with Wilson and Bissar, the way they're blocking shots left and right, they're going to do this defensively. But you look at the roster that the Bonnies has put together, they've only got, 3 guys 6'8" or taller that even, average, points per game on their roster. So like many mid-majors, they're not very big. They don't have the size to match up with Carolina, who, with Luka Bogovac in your starting lineup and Jaren Stevenson playing at the 3, you got 4 guys that are 6'6" or taller that are playing for you. And even Kyan Evans at 6'3" gives you positional size. We look at the fact that Daryl Simmons II is just 5'10". Mm-hmm. So Carolina's pretty much got the height advantage 1 through 5. And with that, man, you need to exploit that. You need to attack that. And we've talked so much about the high-low game and the return of that. It helps when your big men are as good as passers as they have been. With the way Carolina, struggled against Navy's zone, I would imagine you're going to see a zone defense at some point in time. I don't know how much zone St. Bonaventure plays through the first 5 games, but I think teams will throw that at Carolina, because I thought Carolina struggled with that in the moment last week against Navy. The important thing is to get the ball to the free throw line and attack. You can either lob it over, or with the way that, Jared Stevenson cuts or Jonathan Powell cuts, you get those baseline cuts that get you layups, dunks, or fouls. Regardless, I just want to see the ball put inside, and I want to attack their size, because once you start attacking their size, they're going to start fouling, and then you get into the bonus, and then you get into their depth, and then you just really can overwhelm an opponent in more ways than one. So, I'd like to see Carolina do that. I think they've done a really good job for the most part this season, wanting to attack inside out first, and against a team that doesn't have the size to handle Carolina's size, that should be the game plan here early and often.
Yeah, with the positional size that Carolina is going to have in this game, the advantage that they're going to have, they have to be able to take advantage of it in this game. I mean, go after these guys in terms of the size. I mean, yeah, you're going to want Carolina to be able to shoot over some of these guys on the perimeter, but at the same time, I mean, this is a team that's not succeeding from the perimeter so far this year. So the easy thing to do is get that ball inside. And I'd love to see some of the guards really be able to drive the basket. There are going to be, some quicker guards in this one with Simmons, being 5'10", 160 pounds. One of the advantages that he has is speed. But, this is an area where, the toughness has to settle in for Carolina. I'd love to see those guards get more downhill, get to the basket, and finish. But most importantly, you need your big men to really bring it in this game. And they have so far this year. There's no reason to believe that they won't. But when Carolina has attacked the basket, you go back to the game against Kansas. And look, this might be the second toughest game that Carolina's played all year. I know that might sound hard to believe after the game against Navy, Looking at the opponents that St. Bonaventure has played, you might think that this would be an easier one for Carolina than that game against Navy. But I'm telling you, I think this is probably the second toughest game that Carolina has played so far this year. But you go back to that game against Kansas and you look at what allowed Carolina to be so successful offensively in that second half. Yeah, the perimeter shooting came, but that was because of what they were doing inside to start the half. And so that's the mindset that they have to take in this game is let's get the ball inside early and often, and let's let these guys go to work. Make them prove to you that they can defend you inside before you look to the outside. And maybe they can. We mentioned it, 5.8 blocks per game. That could be something that Carolina could find when they get in there. But before you start looking to the perimeter and saying this is the way that we have to win the game because you're looking at that block statistic, make them prove that they can actually handle you inside. Because I think if you go inside often, I think you're going to find out that they probably can handle you in there, and Carolina is going to have a very successful day on the inside.
All right, the last key I wrote down for this game, really, I think it matters in this game, but it's really setting up for Michigan State and really for all the tough games to come ahead. Carolina's got to find their outside shooting touch. As of right now, they're averaging 9 makes per game, which is 101st in the country. They're averaging over 27 attempts per game, which is 82nd, but they're shooting just 33% from behind the three-point line. That's if you round up. That's 213th in college basketball to 365 teams. And I can sit here and say that I think they're a better shooting team than the numbers suggest until I'm blue in the face. But at some point, you got to call a spade a spade. I do think 5 games is too small of a sample size to do so. So I think by the next 5 games, that's 10 games. Well, that's a third of your season. I think this there to maybe fair to start drawing some conclusions. And I think it's important to remember, and this has been the thing I've harped on the most, I do think Carolina is generating good shots. I do think they are getting quality outside attempts. You're getting 1, uncontested threes, and I think 2, you're getting threes where your guys want the ball. For Jonathan Powell, it's a corner 3. For Luka Bogovac, I think he really wants a transition 3. For Jaron Stevenson, I think he's a guy that if he's on either wing, you pick and roll, and that defender is in drop coverage, he'll pop that 3. So I think the guys are very aware of when and where to take their shots. But at some point, you got to start making them. I love the aggressiveness I saw from Kai and Evans against Navy, but you can't go 1 for 8 every single game and have me up here defending you. I want to, but I can't do that. So I need you to go 3 from 8 if you want to take that many 3-point shots. So I think this is, again, a bigger thing to get you ready for the matchup with Michigan State, because I think you're going to have to make some perimeter shots to win that game. This is your first time away from home. This is a different venue. God knows what the lighting will be like after some of the lighting we've seen at some of these holiday events the last weekend or so. So you got to get adjusted to all that, but you still need to see the ball go in the basket from the outside, and hopefully Carolina shoots closer to what I think they are capable of shooting, which is shooting 37, 38% on a much more consistent basis.
Yeah, that'd be lovely. But going into the game, it's why I said, you really need to establish that inside presence, because it's not guaranteed that you're going to be able to succeed from the outside at the rate that you need to. You're right. Carolina's taking a decent amount of threes from the outside, and I have liked the threes that they have taken. I have not looked at a lot of their shots and said to myself, man, these are bad shots from this team. That's the reason they're not going down. Most of them, when you look at it, a lot of them aren't even that contested. It's just shots from the outside that are not falling for Carolina. So, yeah, you're right. At some point, this team needs to have it click for them from the outside. And I think they've got guys that are capable of doing it based off of some of the statistics that we've seen from their previous stops. You look at Luka Bogovac, I think that is certainly something that you're expecting is going to work for him at some point because of what he was able to do over in the Adriatic League. I think he's going to eventually find his groove from out there. Same thing with Kyan Evans, coming over from Colorado State. It took a little bit of time last year for him to really find his, find some steady production from beyond the arc. And once he was able to do that, that really changed his entire game. I think that certainly is something that we could see again this year, but you're hoping it clicks a little bit earlier for him. Jonathan Powell, we need that effect from him coming off the bench. In this past game against Navy, Jonathan Powell was nowhere to be found. I mean, just had no effect on the game. That can't happen again in this one. You've got to be a guy that can come onto the floor and knock down some threes for this group. And so I think that's going to be one of the things that this staff is going to be focusing on is, can this finally be a game where things start to click a little bit from beyond the arc, or is this just going to be a team that's going to be based inside? And I'm going to tell you, the thing is that in this game, it might work. You might be perfectly fine. You might be a team that can win just because of how good you are on the interior. In the game against Michigan State, you're going to have to be able to knock down some shots from the outside, because if Michigan State's able to knock down shots the way that they were against Kentucky, now they're a weird team, don't get it wrong, because they had a successful day from that area against Kentucky. Against Arkansas, they hit 1-3 the entire game and found a way to win. So they're a team that can win multiple different ways, but if you're going to win that game, I think you're going to have to be able to knock down double-digit shots from the outside. This is where it's got to start to click for Carolina. This could be a game where it starts for them, and hopefully they can find some success here in Fort Myers from the outside.
All right. Carolina enters the game with an 84.7% chance to win. That, according to ESPN's analytics. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins the game. I think they do win it by double digits, but I do think this is a much stiffer test, I think, than, maybe some people believe coming into this one. So I think Carolina's got to be ready for anything that comes their way. You've got a dynamic, small scoring guard who's going to want to attack the basket. So you've got to be ready for that. If you're Carolina, that's what you saw in your last game, and you didn't handle it very well. But maybe that was the wake-up call that you needed, or that your guys on the perimeter needed, to be able to take that away. I think this is going to be one of those games where if Carolina has to do it again, they'll switch Caleb Wilson onto him, and he'll be able to handle his own out there. I mean, you look at that second half against Navy, 4 steals really shut down what Navy was doing with their small point guard. So I'll be interested to see, can the guys that that are out there at that point guard spot, Kyan Evans, Derek Dixon, really control their own in this game. I think they're going to have a successful night from beyond the arc. Really think this is a game where Luka Bogovac goes off. I don't think that St. Bonaventure is going to have any sort of answer for Caleb Wilson or Henry Vassar in this game. And so I believe that's why Carolina is going to be able to get a pretty substantial win over St. Bonaventure to set the stage for a big one on Thursday in Fort Myers against Michigan State.
Yeah, I think Carolina wins as well. I think Carolina wins by double digits. As has been the theme in virtually every game so far Carolina has played, there isn't a man on that St. Bonaventure roster that can hold Caleb Wilson's jockstrap. And he continues, I think, to be devalued. I can think he continues to be underrated. That's a good news for us. That's a good news for him, because he gets motivated off of that, and he continues to play at an unreal level. He's the only guy in the country averaging what his stat line would suggest, which is over 20 points, 10 rebounds, the assists, the blocks, the steals. No one in the country is doing what he is doing. I think he'll fuel Carolina to a big win on Tuesday. I think Henry Vassar continues to be that steadying force. Hopefully you get much more efficient contributions, though, from Luka Bogovac and Kyan Evans, because at some point Carolina needs those guys to be efficient scorers for them in the backcourt. No matter what happens, we'll have you covered here on the podcast, and same for the website, HeelToughBlog.com, where I'll have you ready with the preview and the recap. Both will go up day of. Carolina, with the early start time, will allow us to recap the game the night of the game. So be on the lookout for that. I'll have you covered even on Thanksgiving Day with the matchup against Michigan State. Carolina football, Heels coming off a tough loss to Duke over the weekend. They don't regain possession of the victory bell. They've been eliminated from bowl contention. Anthony has you covered with that loss, and we're getting you ready for the final game of the regular season, the rivalry matchup with NC State. So look out for all of that coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, just search the Four Corners Podcast, where we encourage you to then there rate, review, and subscribe. If you're a video consumer, the best way to keep up with us is like and follow us on Facebook at Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me at Twitter, HTB_Josh. If you do any of those things, the second we go live, you will be notified. And here's the schedule for this week, guys. Carolina is in action on Tuesday. As I mentioned earlier, start time. So we'll have we will go live Tuesday night to recap the game against St. Bonaventure. We'll be back on Wednesday with the Michigan State preview. And then Thursday, even though it's a holiday, and Carolina plays at 4:30, we will recap the game Thursday night. So we want to make sure you are up to date. You've got all the subscriptions that you need, all the notifications set. That way you don't miss any of our coverage of Carolina basketball. But with that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.